Clarissa Morgan stared at the yellowish-brown envelope in her hands. The envelope was worn, smelling like an old cabinet that hadn't been opened for ages. There was no sender's name, no modern postal stamp, only a handwritten script in an 18th century style on the front. Clarissa Morgan, personal and urgent. She carefully tore open the tip, and inside was a thick textured sheet of paper, written with ink that seemed to have come from a quill pen. There was only one sentence. "Your leading role awaits on the stage." Clarissa read it over and over, trying to find a hidden meaning. She was a novice theater actress from New York. Her name had never appeared in a Broadway main cast. Her last job was merely an understudy for a supporting role in a local play. But this invitation felt personal, as if someone knew her better than she knew herself. She searched online, typing the phrase "stage where time no longer moves." What appeared made the hairs on her neck stand up. Dock Street Theater, Charleston, South Carolina. An old colonial-style building originally built in the 18th century, later burned down, rebuilt, and now reputedly inhabited by many dark and mysterious stories. Clarissa froze when she read a line in its historical article. "Inside, time seems frozen. Old performances never truly end." Within a week, she was at the airport heading to Charleston. The plane landed at a small airport. The humid air typical of the southern region immediately embraced her. Through the taxi window, Clarissa saw the quiet old town view. Cobblestone streets, old buildings with wrought iron balconies, antique street lamps, and a quiet atmosphere that contrasted sharply with New York's hustle and bustle. When the car stopped in front of Dock Street Theater, Clarissa took a deep breath. The building was old, sturdy, and beautiful. Its historic stage had witnessed generations of actors and classical stage tragedies. Yet there was something else. Something she couldn't explain. As if the theater was watching her. She stepped toward the front door. The wooden door was dark and smelled damp. When she touched the brass door handle, a cold shiver ran down her arm. The door creaked open by itself with a long squeak. No one was there. But her footsteps echoed through the vast main hall. The high ceiling with an old crystal chandelier hung motionless. The atmosphere was so quiet. On the reception desk there was a handwritten note again, with the same old-fashioned ink style. "Welcome, Clarissa. The stage has been waiting." Her heart raced. She didn't know who wrote it. She hadn't even told anyone she was coming. But what disturbed her more, the note seemed to have known she would arrive, even before she was sure she would come. In the distance, above the main stage, a giant red curtain slowly moved on its own, as if a wind blew from behind the walls, even though the air inside was still. Clarissa stood in the middle of the hall, staring at the stage. Unconsciously, she stepped forward, as if pulled, as if called by something unseen yet very real. And at that moment, she felt it. Something was watching her. Not human, not animal, but an invisible being, waiting all along behind the curtain of history. Clarissa's steps halted when the sound of heavy shoes echoed from the side of the hall. An old man emerged from a dim corridor, wearing a dark gray uniform with a small Dock Street Theater emblem on his left chest. A dusty flat cap rested on his bald head, and his eyes were hidden behind round glasses that seemed too thick for ordinary lenses. His gaze was sharp yet weary, like someone who had seen too many things that should never have been seen. "Miss Morgan?" he asked in a hoarse voice. Clarissa nodded hesitantly. "Yes, I'm Clarissa. I received an invitation." "I know," he cut in. He approached without a smile. "I'm Mr. Whitmore, the caretaker of this theater, kind of like the manager too. I've been looking after this place for over 3 decades. And now it's your turn." "My turn too?" Whitmore just stared at her. "To stand on this stage, like those who came before you." Clarissa was about to ask more, but the old man turned, slowly walking toward the dark corridor. "Come, I'll show you the room where you'll stay." They walked through narrow, cold corridors. The old chandeliers swayed gently overhead, casting a yellowish light that never seemed quite bright enough. Along the walls hung black and white photos of actors and actresses from the past, faces mostly somber or forcing smiles, as if trapped in memories they never wished to relive. Whitmore stopped in front of an old wooden door numbered 3A. He reached into his pocket and handed an iron key to Clarissa. Before turning away, the old man spoke softly, flat but with a strange emphasis. "If you're daring enough, at least remember this. Don't go up to the balcony after midnight. And if you hear applause, ignore it." Clarissa furrowed her brow. "Excuse me?" Whitmore looked straight into her eyes. "The balcony isn't a place for humans after 12 o'clock. And the applause isn't a welcome." He seemed about to continue but held back. It was as if he wanted to say much more but feared the consequences. Or maybe he was afraid to recall something he had buried deep in his memory. Clarissa studied the old man, searching for signs that this was just some eccentric theater staff's joke. But there was no smile. No mischievous glint behind a joke. Only a face full of shadows and real fear. She tried to sound lighthearted. "I understand, Mr. Whitmore. It's an old tradition, right?" Whitmore snorted. "Tradition? No. It's a legacy of what remains." Before Clarissa could ask more, he walked away, hunched over, his steps heavy, as if bearing a burden of history he never managed to let go. Clarissa opened her room door. Her room was simple, classically styled, with an iron bed and a small window overlooking the stage from the second floor. She dropped her bag and looked around. Everything seemed normal. Nothing strange, except the fact that she had just been warned by the building's caretaker not to go up to the balcony after midnight and to ignore the sound of applause. As she closed the door, faintly from afar she heard 2 claps. Soft claps. Heavy, as if coming from an empty room too vast. Clarissa remained silent. She wanted to believe it was just the sound of wood expanding or the echo of her own footsteps. But something inside her, the most primal instinct, whispered that this theater held more than just history. She looked at her watch. 11:48 p.m. 12 minutes before midnight. And the balcony was only a few meters from the window where she stood. The main stage of Dock Street Theater looked like an ancient painting brought to life. Old spotlights hung from above the stage, casting a fading yellowish glow that left long shadows in every corner. The atmosphere was silent, almost eerie. No crew, no judges, not even an audience. Only Clarissa, the standing microphone, and the faint chime of old iron expanding in the night's chill. She stood in the center of the stage, wearing a blood-red gown as instructed in the invitation. In her left hand she held a short script, a classic Shakespeare monologue. She took a deep breath, then began to read. Her voice was soft but full of emotion, filling the empty space with an unusual resonance. "Out, out, brief candle," she said with a deep expression. Then came the sound. Applause. Soft, slow, almost polite. Only twice. The claps came from the upper balcony, right above the row of seats that now held only dust and spider webs. Clarissa stopped reading. She turned her head upward. Her eyes squinted, trying to pierce the darkness there. The balcony should have been empty. Mr. Whitmore had earlier mentioned it had been closed to the public for years due to safety reasons. There was no access except through an old wooden staircase that had been barricaded. She waited. No other sound followed. Only the whisper of the night wind sneaking in through cracks in the old theater walls. Maybe it was just an echo, she thought. She resumed her monologue, this time with a stronger tone, wanting to prove to herself she was not afraid. That all this was just part of the eerie atmosphere of an ancient theater. But when she reached the climax of the script, the sound returned. Applause. 3 times. Then, followed by a more startling sound. "Very good," a hoarse whisper came from the balcony above. The voice was almost that of an old man, but with a flat, cold tone, emotionless, like an echo with no origin. Clarissa immediately looked toward the source. She bent slightly to see the underside of the balcony more clearly. There was no one. The shadows cast by the spotlight only added to the strange impression, as if there was a figure who should have been standing there, but was invisible. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice echoing. No answer. Only the creak of old wooden boards groaning softly, like footsteps that didn't touch the ground. Then another whisper came from the same direction, this time too faint to make out the words. Clarissa gripped her script tighter. She wasn't the type to panic easily, but this time her heart started pounding erratically. She turned around, looking around. The stage now felt much larger, as if it was expanding by itself. The spotlight that had been on flickered briefly, then steadied again. She looked toward the audience seats. Empty. Silent. She stepped back slowly until she accidentally stepped on the microphone cable. The mic toppled, producing a sharp clanging sound that shattered the silence. Then the applause returned, faster, louder. Like fake enthusiasm. A kind of recognition not from humans, but from something only imitating human behavior. Suddenly, the side door to the stage opened slightly. A cold breeze rushed in, messing up Clarissa's hair. Amid the gust, she heard the heavy voice again repeating, "Very good." Clarissa ran off the stage, grabbing her bag from the nearest chair, and nearly collided with Mr. Whitmore, who appeared from nowhere. "Did you hear that applause?" she shouted, her voice trembling. Whitmore didn't answer. He only sighed deeply and whispered, "I told you, never consider it a welcome. They like what's new." What's fresh? Who? She asked almost inaudibly. Mr. Whitmore stared blankly toward the balcony. Invisible beings that haunt this stage. They think you're part of the next show. And before Clarissa could ask anything more, the applause sounded again. But this time, from behind them. Clarissa couldn't sleep that night. Though her body was exhausted and her mind weary from the strange events during the audition, her eyes remained open, staring at the cracked ceiling of the old room. She was staying in one of the upstairs rooms of Dock Street Theater, which Whitmore said was once used by performers decades ago when the shows were still active. The room was cold, the furniture antique and heavy, and the walls seemed to hold silent sighs from the past. The antique clock in the corner ticked slowly, marking the night with its heavy sound. At 2 in the morning, a soft noise came from the hallway. It wasn't startling, rather too gentle, like silk brushing against wood. Soft, light footsteps as if weightless. Clarissa tensed. She knew she was alone on that floor. Mr. Whitmore was asleep in the guard room near the front door, and the theater had long stopped accepting visitors. Curiosity battled fear. Clarissa rose from her bed, walked slowly to the door, and opened it just enough to peek. The dim hallway was empty. But a few seconds later, from the far end appeared a woman. She walked slowly, wearing a dark red gown that swept the wooden floor. Her steps were calm but not quite natural, as if her body floated just above the surface. Long hair hung down covering part of her face, and her skin was too pale, almost gray, contrasting sharply with the vivid color of her dress. As if the color of life had long left that body. Clarissa held her breath. Her heartbeat quickened. "Hello," she called in a near whisper. But the woman didn't respond, didn't turn. She kept walking down the hallway toward the narrow staircase leading to the upper balcony, the balcony long forbidden to visit. Her footsteps made no sound on the stairs. Her red gown fluttered lightly as if blown by a breeze that only touched her. Clarissa stepped out of the room, following slowly. Her legs trembled, but curiosity overpowered her reason. The woman reached the end of the stairs. And when Clarissa was a few steps behind, the figure paused briefly as if knowing she was being watched. She vanished. Not hiding, not rushing away, but truly disappeared, like mist blown away by the wind. Clarissa froze in place. Her throat tightened. She stared at the empty stairs. The red gown that had just swept the floor was nowhere to be seen. The air around her grew colder, biting deep into her bones. But it was no ordinary cold. There was a strange pressure, like standing beside something unseen yet aware of her presence. Returning to her room felt like walking inside a nightmare. Every step seemed followed, every shadow seemed to move. Clarissa closed her door, locked it tight, and leaned her body against the wall. Her hands still trembled as she reached for her phone. No signal. No internet. Only the dark screen and time moving slowly. She tried to sleep, but sounds from outside the door still came through. This time not just footsteps, but also faint whispers in an unrecognizable language, as if coming from invisible creatures gathered outside, deliberating whether to let her sleep or disturb her further. Morning arrived slowly. Sunlight seeped through the cracks of the old window, offering a faint warmth. Clarissa cautiously opened her door, hoping it had all been a nightmare. But in front of her door lay something. A piece of red cloth from that same gown. That morning, a thin mist still hung over the windows of Dock Street Theater as Clarissa hurried toward the guard's room. Her eyes were swollen, a mix of exhaustion and fear still shading her face. She hadn't slept since the events of last night. The woman in the red gown, the silent footsteps, and the piece of red cloth lying in front of her door remained vivid in her memory. Mr. Whitmore was brewing coffee when she arrived. The old man regarded Clarissa with a look he had long kept. A look of someone who knows something but chooses to remain silent for the sake of sanity. I saw something last night, Clarissa said, her voice barely a whisper. Whitmore didn't seem surprised. He gently set his coffee cup on the wooden table and looked deeply into Clarissa's eyes. The red gown? Clarissa nodded. Whitmore took a long breath. Many have seen her. That figure appeared ever since her old room was reopened. We had locked it for years. But management wanted an authentic historical atmosphere, so it was opened again. Who is she? Whitmore didn't answer immediately. He stood up, took an old key from the hook on the wall, and gestured for Clarissa to follow. They walked slowly down the corridor toward the narrow staircase leading to the balcony. Their footsteps echoed softly over the old floorboards. The wooden stairs creaked, each step seeming to awaken something from a long sleep. When they reached the balcony, Clarissa immediately felt a piercing cold. The air upstairs was different from the rest of the theater. denser, quieter, as if holding its breath. Morning light streamed through the tall windows, illuminating the wooden floor covered in a fine layer of dust. Then Clarissa saw it. Footprints. Small, bare footprints pressed into the dust, lined up from the direction of the stairs toward a chair in the corner of the balcony. Their size was no bigger than an adult woman's foot, but the contours were clear. Heel, arched toes gripping the floor as if the owner walked cautiously. The footprints stopped in front of an old chair that looked ordinary, except for one thing. The chair exuded cold. Whitmore stood silently, staring at the prints as if he had known them for years. "That chair," he murmured, "is always cold. No matter the season. Even in summer, when the theater's roof becomes like an oven, that chair stays like ice." Clarissa slowly approached the chair. Her heart pounded fiercely. When she stood right beside it, the skin on her arm immediately tingled, like being touched by something invisible, yet real to other senses. She touched the chair's backrest. It was frozen, like stone soaked in ice water overnight. "Long ago," Whitmore continued softly, "there was an actress who often sat there. Her name was Nettie. She never got a chance to perform on the main stage. Always rejected, always a shadow. Until one night she disappeared. No one knew where. But since then, this place changed." Clarissa swallowed hard. "You think that spirit is Nettie?" Whitmore didn't answer at once. He just gazed at the dust and footprints. "Whoever or whatever it is. But since she reappeared, sounds have come too. Applause, whispers, sometimes laughter. All from places that should be empty. As if the theater still goes on. But the audience is no longer human." Clarissa closed her eyes briefly. She could feel it now. Not just an old story or worker's tale. Behind every wooden wall, behind every empty seat, there was something, unseen beings, watching, judging, and waiting for the next show. She stepped back slowly from the cold chair. The footprints were still there. But no footprints returning, only one way, in, not out. As if whoever, or whatever, sat there, had never left their place. Rain fell softly outside Dock Street Theater, tapping on the roof like gentle whispers. Inside the building, silence reigned, broken only occasionally by the creaking of wooden floors, as if adjusting to the footsteps of those who rarely passed through. That day, Clarissa decided to explore the costume room. She wanted to find a gown suitable for her next monologue rehearsal. But more than that, she wanted to feel closer to the stage, to the stories that had once lived there. To her, costumes were more than fabric. They held energy, memories, even fragments of the souls of those who wore them. The costume room was on the lower floor, behind the stage. Its wooden door was heavy and creaked when opened, revealing a dimly lit space filled with metal racks, headless mannequins, and old wardrobes slowly succumbing to age. In the corner of the room was a small, faded blue cabinet. Its upper door was left slightly ajar. Curious, Clarissa bent down and opened the cabinet fully. Inside was a small carved wooden box, covered in dust but unlocked. Clarissa carefully opened it. Within the box lay several old items. A gold brooch shaped like a tragedy and comedy mask, a hand mirror with carved rose patterns on its frame, and a neatly folded letter, its ink still intact though clearly decades old. With trembling hands, Clarissa unfolded the letter. Its black ink looked freshly dried despite the unmistakable scent of aged paper. To the next actress, if you are reading this, then the stage has chosen you. But beware of desires too strong. Here dreams can come true, but the price is not always visible. This theater holds something unseen, but it can possess you anytime. Someone who trusted the stage too much. No sender's name, no date, just words that felt deeply personal, as if the heartfelt voice of someone who lost everything because of too much love for the spotlight. Clarissa stared at the letter for a long time. The word possessed stirred something inside her. She recalled the sound of applause from the balcony, the whisper, "Very good," and the cold from the corner chair. All of it was not hallucination. Something was here. Something watching, judging, and perhaps wanting more than just a performance. She looked at her reflection in the hand mirror. Her face appeared normal. Yet somehow, in the back of the reflection, she seemed to see another silhouette standing behind her. A faint shape, faceless as if made of mist. When she turned, of course, no one was there. With a heavy breath, she put the mirror back in the box and slipped the letter into her jacket pocket. As she left the costume room, Clarissa felt colder than before. Not because of the room's temperature, but because of a new awareness. She was not just a visitor in this old theater. She was walking on unfinished history. An old story that did not want to end. And maybe that story was rewriting itself. with Clarissa as the next lead actress in a drama whose audience was not all from the same world. Night slowly fell over Charleston, and Dock Street Theater once again sank into a heavy silence. The air inside the building was colder than usual, as if its wooden walls absorbed all warmth and replaced it with whispers from the past. Clarissa couldn't sleep. The letter from the past she found earlier that day kept haunting her thoughts. She felt as if something, or someone, was watching her more closely now. The stage was calling, and Clarissa, as if hypnotized by an unseen pull, walked slowly toward the performance hall. The main lights were off. Only a faint glow from the old wall lamps cast long shadows over the audience seats. Clarissa stood right at the center of the stage, the very spot where the mysterious applause had once echoed. She regulated her breathing, lifted her chin, and began reciting her new monologue. Her voice echoed softly, creating a resonance that seemed to awaken something from the depths beneath the stage floor. But in the middle of her words, Clarissa felt goosebumps rise. There was a strange pressure behind her, like a gentle breath brushing her neck. She stopped speaking. Slowly she turned around. Empty. No one was on stage with her. Yet when she glanced at the large mirror placed to the side of the stage, once a tool for practicing expressions, she saw something that stopped her blood cold. Two shadows. One was hers, standing tall in her rehearsal gown. The other was the shadow of a woman with long hair, wearing a deep red dress, her face pale and her eyes empty. The woman's mouth opened slowly, but the sound did not come from the mirror. The voice whispered directly into Clarissa's ear, as if coming from the very air itself. Take my role. Live for me. Clarissa was frozen, her body stiff. Her heart raced wildly, yet she couldn't move. The words filled her mind, echoing like a spell. Live for me. Take my role. Suddenly, strange flashes flooded her mind. Scenes from the past stage. A young woman crying backstage, scattered scripts, the roar of an audience turning into screams, and a chandelier falling from the ceiling, hitting something or someone. Clarissa tried to step back, but her feet felt rooted to the wooden floor. She felt heat at the nape of her neck, despite the biting cold around her. The woman in the mirror drew closer, her face pressed against the glass surface. Her eyes didn't blink, locking Clarissa's frozen gaze. You have spoken my lines. You have opened the door. Clarissa wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The world blurred. The stage spun. The old lights buzzed like bees, and the audience chairs began to sway by themselves, creating long, piercing creaks. Suddenly, Clarissa's body went limp. Darkness surged into her vision like thick black fog. Her knees wobbled and she collapsed onto the cold wooden floor. The last sounds she heard before losing consciousness were soft applause, and the woman's voice whispering once more, "Your new performance has begun." Clarissa fainted. And as the theater's lights went out completely that night, only the mirror by the stage still reflected two shadows, though no one stood there. The long-awaited day had finally arrived. Dock Street Theater was packed to the brim, spotlights blazed sharply, and the air inside the room trembled with the anticipation of an audience hungry for a story. Tickets had sold out long ago. The presence of Clarissa as the lead actress was an undeniable magnet. Yet, beneath the glittering surface, Clarissa felt an unease she couldn't explain. Standing behind the curtain, her heartbeat raced, not just from ordinary nervousness. There was something different. A foreign force controlling her body, making her feel like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. When the stage lights turned on, Clarissa stepped forward with determined strides. But her eyes did not reflect herself. Instead, they held something else, something not her own. Every hand movement that should have been graceful and expressive became stiff and unnatural. Her voice, usually full of emotion, now sounded flat and cold, as if memorized without soul. The audience was mesmerized, captivated by the strange yet compelling performance. But for Clarissa, the alien feeling enveloping her body grew stronger. She felt separated from her own mind, as if the soul standing on stage was not entirely hers. Each scene ended with thunderous applause from the audience. Yet something made Clarissa's skin crawl. The applause did not come only from the front seats or sides of the stage. From the upper balcony, loud, clear, and echoing claps sounded throughout the theater. But the balcony had long been closed for renovation. No one was up there. Not a single soul. Clarissa tried to ignore it, thinking it was an auditory illusion. But the applause returned, growing louder and echoing longer, filling the entire room with a cold, dreadful resonance. Behind the curtain, Mr. Whitmore watched with worried eyes, as if he knew something unspoken. He raised his hand, signaling Clarissa to stay focused, but his face turned pale. Clarissa's body began to feel heavy, as if something was trying to take control. Every line she spoke felt like a spell binding her to something unseen. She caught a glimpse of a shadow at the edge of the stage, a woman in a red dress she had seen before, standing still, her empty eyes staring straight at her. Inside her chest, Clarissa felt a piercing anxiety, not fear of the audience, but fear of the invisible being now seemingly taking over her stage. When the curtain closed at the end of the performance, the applause from the balcony continued to echo, as if demanding something unfinished. Clarissa knew that night was not just an ordinary art show. She had become part of a darker, more dangerous story, one far beyond the reach of the real world. The fear inside her would not fade, and she realized that this stage, Dock Street Theater, was not only a witness to history but also a home for invisible beings who desired more than just a performance. After the curtain fell and the audience's cheers began to fade, Clarissa returned to the dressing room with heavy steps. Her body was tired, but her mind raced uncontrollably, unable to shake the haunting image on the stage. She walked through the narrow, winding, and dim corridors of Dock Street Theater, carrying the rehearsal dress that now felt like a burden from the past. Upon entering the dressing room, the small space was shrouded in shadows, illuminated only by the faint flicker of a desk lamp. There, a large mirror stood firmly, perfectly reflecting the small room. Clarissa sighed, hoping to see herself, but what appeared in the glass was far from what she expected. That vacant gaze appeared again, the face of a woman in a red dress, her skin pale, eyes seeming to pierce Clarissa's soul. The woman stood motionless, staring without blinking, her face trapped between two worlds behind the glass. No words, only a gaze filled with sorrow and longing. Clarissa felt a strange tingling at her fingertips. Hesitant, she slowly raised her hand and touched the cold surface of the glass. The moment her fingers met the mirror, a chilling cold surged through her entire body, like an electric current flowing from another realm. Suddenly, a faint voice whispered, not from the woman's lips, but from within Clarissa's mind. A voice full of yearning and pain. "Your life and mine are now bound on the same stage. I once stood here, dreaming, struggling, and ultimately trapped behind this shadow. Take my role and let me breathe again, in your way." Clarissa froze. The message was not merely words but both a warning and a plea. The woman was not just a figure meant to frighten, but a lost soul trapped in a dimension hard to separate from reality. "Don't let me be stuck here forever. Live for me, don't let this history repeat endlessly." Tears welled up in Clarissa's eyes, a mix of fear and sympathy. She felt a heavy burden, not just the responsibility as an actress, but as someone now bearing the fate to confront the dark past of Dock Street Theater. As she withdrew her hand from the mirror, the woman's shadow slowly faded, as if retreating back into the darkness behind the glass. Yet the gaze remained etched in Clarissa's memory, silently demanding a promise. Clarissa stood lost in thought at the dimly lit dressing room doorway, realizing her struggle had only just begun. The Dock Street stage was not hers alone tonight, but belonged to the woman in the red dress, a spirit unseen who needed liberation from an invisible prison. The whispers and applause from the empty balcony still echoed in her ears, reminding Clarissa of the promise she must hold tightly. The next day, Clarissa sat lost in thought on a wooden chair outside the theater. The cold evening breeze swept through her hair, carrying the fresh scent of Charleston sea, yet unable to dispel the unease within her chest. Dark thoughts continued to haunt her, the shadow of the woman in the red dress, the applause from the empty balcony, the silent whispers, all relentlessly echoing in her mind. Night after night, the Dock Street stage transformed from a place of dreams into a prison of the soul. Her body felt no longer her own, her mind grew hazy, and fear twisted into a suffocating dread that gripped every corner of her heart. What had started as an artistic adventure had become a very real nightmare. Clarissa realized one undeniable truth. She was not just facing a typical acting challenge but trapped in a world beyond human logic, a realm of unseen beings blurring the line between the real and the supernatural. After long contemplation and an empathetic talk with Mr. Whitmore, Clarissa made the hardest decision, to leave Dock Street Theater and return to New York. She knew this might mean giving up a major opportunity in her career, but the price to pay was too high, the price of her soul's freedom and sanity. With a heavy heart, she wrote a brief resignation letter to the director. The letter did not mention the mystical ordeal ensnaring her, only citing health reasons and the need to rest from mental pressures. She understood that not everyone would believe the real story, and that was none of her concern. On her last night at the theater, Clarissa walked one final time through the old corridors. She gazed at the empty stage with a mix of emotions, longing, fear, and relief. she silently said goodbye to the woman in the red dress who might still be waiting for her in the shadows. As she stepped out of the great door of Dock Street Theater, she felt the fresh outside air welcome her, as if the real world was soothing her fatigue. Yet, deep in her heart, she knew that the part of her touched by the mystical realm would always remain, becoming a part of the never-ending story of Dock Street. Clarissa decided to keep her distance from the mystical world, focus on her real life, and strive to find the peace she had long sought. Sometimes, freedom must be paid for dearly, with the courage to leave behind something captivating yet dangerous.